Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
So, Matt, I understand you have news regarding your trivia setup.
It has been a stressful week, man. I host bar trivia at this bar on Tuesdays, and then on a Thursday, a friend wanted to go out and get a beer, and given that it is the only bar in town that is open after 10 p.m., we're like, okay, let's go to Bob's. And, you know, hey, little busman's holiday, I get to hang out at the bar where I work on a night when I don't work there. I walk in there, and the manager comes up to me and says, I don't know if you heard, but I just found out this afternoon, we are closing. We are out of business. We are shutting our doors in a week and a half. And this was total shock. Did not know this was coming. Totally surprised. And I'm like, oh, well, that means that everyone at this bar is out of a job. But that also means that I'm out of a job because I have no place to host bar trivia. There was just a very stressful week. But then I encouraged my boss to get us set up at another place, which I thought would be even better. And he did. So we got to...
You're saying your trivia boss, not your Bob's Pizza boss.
Exactly. The guy who runs my trivia company. He negotiated a new deal with a new restaurant/bar here in Evanston that I've always been a big fan of and is now going to host our trivia. But the whole deal came through at the last second last night. Then as I was walking into Bob's, there was a news reporter with a microphone doing a stand-up in front of Bob's with a camerawoman doing about the closing of Bob's Pizza. Now, that sounds impressive until I tell you that this was Northwestern News Network. So these were student reporters and student camerawoman, student reporter. But they were doing this live coverage of the closing of Bob's because it's one of the big campus hangouts at Northwestern University and certainly the biggest place for trivia. And I was like, can I jump on the air and give you guys the news? And they were like, what, you've got breaking news? And I said, yes, I have breaking news. We are moving the trivia tour around the corner, and we are going to resume next week at another location that's even closer to Northwestern. And they were very happy to have the scoop. And then I went ahead and went into work.
All right. Well, meanwhile, I think I mentioned in a previous episode, started doing Tuesday bar trivia with some folks that I know here in Greensboro. And I've been there 5 weeks in a row at this point. And since I've started, we have won 4 times and come in second the other time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure if we're just that good or what, or if it's just luck. But my favorite time, though, was last week. We were in 5th place going into the final round. And the way they do this is like Final Jeopardy. You can wager your points. Mm-hmm. And so we wagered everything and figured, okay, well, best we can hope for is we're going to come in, 4th, 5th, 6, somewhere in there. So the final question was, name the subject of the following Charles Dickens quote from A Tale of Two Cities. It says, in the name of the sharp newly born female. And I was like, it's clearly the guillotine.
Oh.
And apparently I am the only one who figured that out of the top 5.
In the whole bar.
Well, no, not in the whole bar. Out of the top 5 teams. So everybody above us got it wrong and lost all their points.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, well, that's anyway. Good. That's very impressive. I don't know if I would have gotten that.
Really? I don't know. I've never even read the book, but all I know is it's about the French Revolution, and I know that the guillotine is sometimes referred to as Madame la Guillotine. So, I figured sharp young woman or whatever it was. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Anyway, so we both have trivia news that is probably quite trivial to anyone listening right now.
At one point on my other previous podcast, the Secrets of the Story podcast, my co-host James Kennedy was yelling at me for not going to his book opening party. And I said, well, it was on a Tuesday. On Tuesdays, I have trivia. And he said, yes, trivia. The very word means frivolous or meaningless. And then I said, actually, it means 3 roads. And he was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Try via 3 roads. Okay, that didn't occur to me. He's like, wait just a second. You distracted me. I was just criticizing you.
Yes. All right. So should we do the thing that we came here to do?
Oh, right. What did we come here to do? We came here to talk about comics, didn't we?
That's the plan, usually. Unless you want to mix it up. We want to change what we do on this podcast.
Yes.
Just talk about trivia.
Yes. Let's talk about horrific things going on in the world. No, let's talk about Let's talk about comic books, the safe thing to talk about.
Yes.
All right, we are beginning to cover June 1968. We are going to, once again, break June 1968 up into 3 episodes. Once again, there's 13 books, so we're going to do 4, 5, and 4. So we've got 4 books to cover this episode. Should be relatively quick, fun, pain-free episode for all of you out there. Who should start with Spider-Man here, Steve?
Well, last time around, you did Spider-Man and Thor while I did Daredevil and X-Men, so I suppose we should do the opposite.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so we are doing Amazing Spider-Man number 61, June of 1968. Oh, What a Tangled Web We Weave, which is an odd title because there doesn't really seem to be a tangled web that is being woven by the protagonist here. But on the cover,
nobody's really lying. It's not like a story about Pete being caught in a lie. I mean, it just makes sense to tell a Spider-Man story called Oh, What a Tangled Web We Weave, and it's weird they haven't done it yet. But they sort of try to justify it on the splash page where they've got Pete sort of moping along with all of his supporting cast caught in a giant web as if he has... I mean, obviously, Spider-Man is living a lie. He does wear a mask. He is a masked figure.
Well, true.
And seemingly everyone has been caught in this tangled web he has weaved when first he practiced to deceive.
Yes. Well, the cover, though, has Gwen and Captain Stacy tied to some kind of a block while what looks like a crucible filled with molten metal is snapping what it's hanging from, and it's about to plummet down and crush the two of them while Spider-Man swings to do something about it. What a tangled web we weave. Perspicaciously produced and philanthropically presented by Stan the Man Lee and John Ring-a-Ding Romita, daringly delineated by Dazzlin' Don Heck, exotically embellished by mixed-up Mickey DeMeo, lonesomely lettered by swingin' Sammy Rosen. And I noticed that this isn't quite alliteration here. All these words at the beginning start with P, but we have some that are pronounced like a P and some that are pronounced like an F.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you would call that. Anyway, yes, it's a well done credit box.
Yes.
We get a little bit of a recap of what's been going on as Pete just thinks to himself about what is going on in his life. We see that Gwen Stacy has read the news about her dad in the newspaper and confronts him about it and realizes that it is true, but also she is realizing that he is not well. And so she is going to take him somewhere and do something about this. They leave the house right as Pete tries to call them and doesn't get them. So he's like, okay, I'm going to go out to their place and try to see them in person. So he swings over there and finds their house being gone through by some gangsters. Spider-Man knocks out the gangsters, and it looks like they're searching for Stacy because Stacy's brainwashing seems to be wearing off, and he's not following orders the way that he should. An aside to MJ and Harry. Harry is very concerned about Peter. MJ, at first, is very frivolous and blowing it off with all of her 60s lingo, but then is convinced that it is something serious that she needs to be worried about.
Well, so she says the most disturbing thing I have ever read in a Marvel comic when Harry goes to pick her up. Harry's like, Mary Jane, why so cheerful? And Mary Jane responds, why not, Dad? There are more than 2 billion people alive today, and half of them are males. M-M-M-M-A-L-E-S. So I read this. I'm like, what the hell? In 1968, there were just 2 billion people alive, and there's 8 billion now, meaning that the world population has essentially quadrupled in my lifetime? That's terrifying. Well, so I went back and I did some research, and Stan Lee was just totally wrong. There weren't 2 billion people alive in 1968. There were 3.5 billion people alive in 1968. So the world population has not essentially quadrupled in my lifetime. It's essentially doubled in my lifetime, which is already scary. You know, that's like terrifying that the number of resources being used up on the globe has doubled in the time that I've been alive. But when I thought it had quadrupled, when I read this panel, I was freaking out. I did all sorts of research. I can link people to various charts and graphs I've read about the world population growth and how the population continues to go up, but the rate of increase has gone down and down and down, and how it's expected for the population to crest at approximately, let's see, where's my chart here? It's expected for the population to crest in the year 2086 at around 10.43 billion and then start to go down because the annual growth rate of the world population has been going down since 1963. But anyway, it freaked me out.
This will be on the test, everybody.
It will be.
Well, because I remember learning when I was in elementary school that there were 4 billion people alive at that point, as far as what I had been told.
I remember being told there were 5 billion people alive and that the Earth was 5 billion years old. And I'm like, oh, well, that's easy to remember. 5 billion people alive, 5 billion years old. It takes 5 billion years. You know, we've accumulated about a person a year in the 5 billion years that Earth has been around, even though that's not actually how that works. But then I quickly realized that the age of the Earth was not changing at all. It was still going to remain around 5 billion and was not going to shoot up to being 10 billion, but that the population was changing. And that soon I realized my population numbers were way off, but my age numbers were still the same. So I realized that those were not two good numbers to peg to each other.
Yes, I think that age number might be rounded up, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so one way or the other, to get back on target here, Harry drives MJ to the Gloom Room A Go-Go, which was the name of the nightclub she was dancing at, which sounds like a very unglamorous name.
Yes.
But she comes to find out it's just closed, and she's like, wait, how am I going to get my money? Another aside to Norman Osborn, he happens to be looking in the paper and seeing something about a documentary that's coming on TV about the Green Goblin, and he's like, why does this bother me? Why is this calling me out? I don't know. And then he finds out that his main research scientist has just ordered a whole bunch of equipment that just showed up in the laboratory. And he's like, I didn't authorize any equipment purchases. What the hell's going on? So he goes down and finds the rather evil looking scientist. He has a quite evil looking grin on his face as he's owning up to this. But Norman's like, okay, just don't let it happen again. Yeah. Which is good because Kingpin was in the next room and probably would have just gone ahead and killed him if he had pushed it much further. So
yeah, really, really weird to have somebody as high status as Kingpin essentially hiding inside Norman Osborn's closet this whole time.
Yes,
but he is.
Yes. So they've decided to move the brainwashing operation to Norman Osborn's lab. And so that's what is going on here. So Pete, knowing he's going up against the Kingpin and knowing the Kingpin has this tie pin that he wears that squirts gas, goes ahead and makes himself a special little gas mask that fits under his Spider-Man mask. So he's double masked, which proves that, yes, you can go ahead and breathe through a mask, people. Yeah. So he's double masked here, and he heads on out. First of all, he takes a side trip to J. Jonah Jameson, ostensibly to try and get information, but how he thinks Jameson's going to give him information, I don't know. It really is just an opportunity to have us have some humorous confrontation between the two.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that the Stacys have decided to try to deal with their problem by leaving town. And so they are at the airport, and they are, however, confronted by the gangsters who had gone to their house and are now here and have tracked them down. Gwen at first thinks they're policemen, but then quickly realizes that they are not. Spider-Man goes to the closed Gloom Room A Go-Go and is looking for any kind of clues. The place has pretty much been stripped bare, except he does find one piece of equipment that has Osborn Laboratories on a little plaque on the inside. So it's not anywhere that somebody would have seen when they're trying to clean up the place. But he's like, okay, well, there's a clue. I'm going to go to Osborn Laboratories. So he gets there, and now, this is one thing that's a little bit confusing. Kingpin seems to be expecting Spider-Man to find them here in the laboratory, and he's got the two Stacys tied up underneath this crucible. Kingpin says, oh no, everybody else leave because I don't want Spider-Man to think that it's too hot for him to come in. I want him to come in thinking he can beat me. But why does he Why does he know that Spider-Man's going to be able to find him here? Did you follow that?
Yeah, Spider-Man took a pretty circuitous route to get there. But yeah, he comes in and Kingpin says, Spider-Man, right on schedule. It's, yeah, I don't want to be certain that the sight of too many foes doesn't scare my intended victim away. Yeah, if Kingpin were sprinkling a trail of breadcrumbs to lead Spider-Man there, he sprinkled it very, very convincingly. I wouldn't think Spider-Man would have ever guessed in a million years that he was being lured into a trap.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. One way or the other, Kingpin uses his tie pin gas attack and is surprised when Spider-Man isn't knocked down by it. Spider-Man uses this to press his advantage. Harry Osborn, actually, is this Harry or is that Norman Osborn? Oh, no, I guess that's actually Norman Osborn comes down to the lab and he hears something. He's like, why are things going on in my lab at night? Comes in and sees what's going on, ends up tackling the guy who made the Zonker machine, the brainwashing machine, and his gun goes off, the scientist's gun goes off, causing the brainwashing machine to explode, which happens to kill the scientist, conveniently enough.
Yes.
But then it also ends up destabilizing this whole crucible that's above them, that's set up as a, what's the word I'm looking for? A mousetrap kind of thing.
Yes.
It's like, why do you have a big crucible above them? Why is that the thing? I'm not sure.
You keep saying crucible. Vat. It's a vat. Crucible sounds like such a fancy word for vat.
Okay. I don't know. I just figure if it has melted metal in it, then it's a crucible, right? No?
Is it? Okay.
I think so.
All right.
I could be wrong, but that's my understanding, is that a container like this containing molten metal is a crucible, but I could be wrong on that.
Okay.
Anyway, one way or the other, Spider-Man comes and sees this is happening and says of Gwen and her father, I won't let you die. I won't. I'm like, well, not today. So, spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't know what's coming in a few years. One way or the other, Spider-Man rescues them and then tries to go get the Kingpin, but the Kingpin's already made his getaway in a helicopter. And Captain Stacy says that Norman Osborn and Spider-Man both helped save them, which hopefully means that Spider-Man is going to be in less trouble than he often is with the law, but we're not sure.
Yes, but then as Spider-Man slinks away, he thinks, how unlucky can you be? She thinks Spidey's a hero, but Peter Parker is all washed up with her. And that I've got to live with. So Many ironies, as always good to end on irony. And as you said many times about Spider-Man, is that supposedly Spider-Man wins and Peter Parker loses in every issue. And that's certainly what happens here.
And next, the name of the dame is Medusa. So we're going to have a Medusa issue next, which is an interesting combination. That's not one that I would necessarily expect to see.
No, they're going to start giving Medusa a push after this, both in here and then in our old friend Marvel Superheroes. They're going to give Medusa a showcase in there. And I don't think it's a good idea because I think prehensile hair is a dumb power. But, oh well, we will see.
So, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny how long they go between Norman Osborn transformations into the Green Goblin. He was last transformed, I think, back in issue 41, and I don't think he transforms again until like issue 96. So we've had 25 issues here without it, and now we're about to go another 35 issues or so until he finally transforms again. I miss him. I miss the Green Goblin, but it's nice to get Norman Osborn if we can't have a Green Goblin, and it's nice to at least have that looming over the book. I noticed that Gwen's boots keep getting bigger. She's got basically thigh-high boots now that she's, as we go into the later 60s, boots are getting a little kinkier. And then
both her boots and her hemline are moving up at the same rate.
But I just wrap up and I say this is a great issue. It's nice to wrap up the brainwashing storyline without dragging it out too much, as they've dragged out some of their other storylines too much. I'm not seeing any heck in this book. This book looks like it was penciled by John Romita and inked by Mike Esposito with no heck coming in the way, especially the ladies' faces, especially the fashions, especially just everything. Everything except for maybe... Ironically, normally when you've got someone who's helping out on art, the one thing they do is everybody's face, and then they let the backup artist do things other than faces. If I had to say anything looked like heck in this book, it might be Spider-Man's face, actually. But certainly not Gwen's face, certainly not MJ's face, certainly not Peter's face. Everything looks very much like Romita to me.
Good. Good issue, and let's move on to Daredevil.
All right, let's do it.
Is this going to be a good issue?
Oh no, this is going to be an awful issue. Yes, let's go on to Here Comes Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, number 41, featuring supposedly the death of Mike Murdock. So I'm a big fan of this cover. I think that Colin always does a good job with random passerbys on city streets. And here he devotes a whole cover pretty much to random passerbys on city streets. I guess one of them may be supposed to be Karen. Then you've got Matt Murdock's ghost or sort of spectral figure sort of appearing over the random passerby on the street, calling out to them, but they can't hear him, which is what happens in the issue.
Actually, come to think of it, I hadn't thought of it until you were describing it, but it reminds me a little bit of an issue of Dead Man.
Yes. Oh, it's very much like a Dead Man cover, like a Neil Adams Dead Man cover, which was going strong over at DC at the time. Were you a fan of this cover?
I hadn't really thought about it too much, but yeah, sure. It's quite good.
Yeah. So then we get to the inside. Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, the death of Mike Murdock, phantasmagorically produced and presented by Stan the Man Lee and Gene the Dean Colan, embellished by John Tartaglione, lettered by Sam Rosen. And now let the agonizing action begin. So we have Daredevil is still stuck in the weird sort of out of time limbo that the time gun shoots you to. And everybody else got out, but he's still here in the sort of green swirling mist. And he's throwing himself around the limbo for a couple pages. Meanwhile, Foggy's girlfriend is still missing. Keep in mind that we were told 2 issues ago that they were all getting hit with a gun that was going to send them 30 minutes into the future, but now it's hours later and they haven't reappeared. So the gun was clearly mislabeled. Karen is, trying to cheer Foggy up. Foggy is meanwhile saying, oh, I'm running for district attorney and I've got this seemingly dead girlfriend and now a seemingly dead partner because Matt's disappeared as well. What am I going to do? Karen says, well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to Matt Murdock's house. Though I promised never to interfere, I've got to do something. I'll go to Matt's apartment, but I know how proud he is. I mustn't admit I've been worried about them. I'll tell him how I came on Foggy's behalf to see if Matt can contact Daredevil to help find Deborah. So then she's going to go over there. I don't want to seem like I'm obsessed with women's shoes, but Colin has always done a terrible job on her shoes. So then meanwhile, we see Foggy walking around and he can't see that Deborah is a ghost who cannot contact him. Foggy decides to do something that we've seen done a couple of times in Marvel Comics, where he puts out false information that he knows all about the Exterminator. And so then he's just trying to lure the bad guys into attacking him. He says, I've noticed by the papers and the radio and TV news programs, the Exterminator and his 3 animal costumed killers are probably looking for me already. He can't hear that his spectral girlfriend is calling out to him. He is, sure enough, nabbed by the Unholy 3, a.k.a. the 3 members of the Animen who are still around. And I didn't realize until I was editing the other episodes of our podcast that the reason, presumably, why they dropped Frogman is because Daredevil now has a different frog-themed villain called Leapfrog. And they figured, oh, we don't want him to have 2 frog-themed villains. So that's why they dropped the Animen named Frogman. Foggy gets in a pretty impressive fistfight with the Animen. Unholy 3, and is kicking and punching him, but eventually they get the better of him and they shove him in the back of a car. I saw you pointed out on our socials where then they go, since we polish off Daredevil, there's nobody who can stand up to us, and everybody knows it. Like, oh, really? Thor can't stand up to you now that you've polished off Daredevil.
The Fantastic Four is going to stay away because they're too scared.
Of the Animen. Yeah. Karen goes to Matt's house, immediately finds that the door is open and he's got a Daredevil costume laid out on the bed. And it's like, okay, this is terrible with secret identities here, people. Daredevil, meanwhile, realizes like, okay, I was supposed to phase back into normal human life at this point, but it's not. Like, their gun is broken. Their gun doesn't quite work right. It hasn't returned me to normal human life like it ought to. Instead, I'm sort of stuck as sort of like a phantom in old-fashioned Superman Phantom Zone comics. Then he comes up with sort of a fascinating idea. He's like, well, if I'm just slightly out of phase, I just need to go really fast. So I'll go ahead and use my grappling hook to attach myself to a car's bumper and have it yank me back into phase with normal time. And that works, which is, okay, this is all comic logic.
There's part of this that sort of seems right. It's like you're being yanked into regular space. But at the same time, it's like, so then how were you able to hook yourself to this car if your grappling hook is also phantom-like? And also, now you're being dragged along the pavement by a car.
Well, it is made clear that does scuff him up some. So then he is very scuffed up. He says, can't appear in public with the torn costume, and decides to go ahead and head home, but finds Karen there in his apartment. But of course, Karen thinks that she would be shocked to find out that Matt Murdock is Daredevil, but she would not be shocked to find out that Matt's twin brother Mike is Daredevil, because that's who she thinks is Daredevil. Of course, there is no twin brother Mike. Matt has created this imaginary twin brother in order to cast through. This whole thing just makes no sense. It just makes no sense.
He created this other identity so he can be a prick to his loved ones.
Yeah, the whole thing makes no sense. So then he's like, he pretending to be his brother Mike comes in the room, pretending to talk to his twin Matt, saying, "Say, Matt, did you see my spare costume I can't find? Oh, it's Karen. Daredevil, I came here looking for your brother. I guess he must have gone out to buy a pizza or something." So then,
would you look at the size of that cat?
Yeah. Expert lying here from Matt/Mike Murdock. He then says something that I remember being something that my parents would say growing up. "Here's your coat. What's your hurry?" He's trying to get her out of his apartment, which is, only reasonable that someone who has broken into your apartment, you're trying to get out the door. And
I think we mostly know that line from It's a Wonderful Life.
Except It's a Wonderful
Except
Life.
In that case, it's "Here's your hat. What's your hurry?"
Yeah, that's true. Meanwhile, the Animen have brought Foggy Nelson back to the Exterminator, and the Exterminator explains that his gun, this, huge science fiction device, which, again, had the whole purpose of sending you 30 minutes into the future, as if every device in the world can't send you 30 minutes into the future. That was the whole point of his gun. And then they kept experimenting with it. And he's like, "Now you'll be the first man ever to be sent back in time past the point of no return." It's like, this one permanently sends you back in time. So this gun causes you to die. And that's why we've had to spend all this money on all this scientific research. Like, they already had guns that caused you to die. They were called guns.
Well, and also suddenly it's sending you back in time.
Yes, it used to send you forward in time. Now it sends you back in time, but it sends you back in time to a time you'll never return from. So it basically just kills you, in which case they could have just used a gun.
Yes. Always with the science fiction guns instead of the guns.
Yes. So then Daredevil breaks in on them, apparently has gotten Karen out of his brownstone, comes in here, breaks in on them, and they get into a big fight. They fight for several pages, but then it ends up with the same thing that always happens, where some machinery suddenly explodes. All that is left is a little bit of Daredevil's torn costume, his chest emblem from his torn costume. And for some reason, this convinces Foggy and everyone else who's there. It's unclear if the bad guys are still around or not, but this convinces Foggy that this convinces Foggy that Daredevil and therefore Mike Murdock are both dead. And that they're...
like, basically they would be vaporized or something like that.
They've been vaporized. That's the only possible explanation for his chest emblem to still be here in this thing. It can't be that, Daredevil just got away without his chest emblem, which is exactly what actually happened. And Daredevil is like, "Here come the police. Foggy will tell them I died in the blast. And that gets my, quote, twin brother, end quote, out of my hair forever. It's easier to just be Matt Murdock." So then he has faked Daredevil's death. He has therefore also faked Mike Murdock's death. And he, I guess, plans to never be Daredevil again. Says it had to happen sooner or later. Mike went out the way he would have wanted to. And Karen says, "Then this will mean the end of Daredevil." And Matt says, "Will it? I wonder." It says, "Next, the new Daredevil." So I don't believe that they've actually written Mike out of the book, but I certainly hope they have. It's the world's dumbest storyline. It's been going on forever. Let's talk about how weird Daredevil is. Let's talk about, again, how weird it is that Roy Thomas has never written an issue of Daredevil. Stanley has made it clear what his favorite books are. His favorite books are the ones where he writes every issue. And that means his favorite books are Fantastic Four, makes sense, Thor, makes sense, Spider-Man, makes sense, and Daredevil. Those are the only 4 books that Stan has written every issue of. Even Thor, he missed a few issues early on. It's just crazy. Why do you love this book, Stan? It is the craziest, daffiest, just nuttiest, not very well done book. It's so shocking. Anyway, Steve, what do you think of this issue?
You largely covered much of it here. I will point out that they were really too specific with people understanding what was going on in this little time slip that they were in. At one point at the beginning, Daredevil is saying to himself, "I can sense the time fibers constantly shifting, constantly changing. At some point in their never-ending motion, there must be an opening." It's like, what? There's time fibers? Sure. Yeah. That totally is what I would think. I'm hoping that we actually are rid of Mike Murdock.
Oh no, there's a third one.
I'm hoping that we actually are rid of No, not Matt Murdock. I'm done with this. I'm done with it. That's it. We can move on to something else.
It is bizarre at the end how, we see this machinery blow up and we never find out what happens to any of the villains. Like, are the Animen and Exterminator all also dead in the explosion? Or are they lying unconscious there? Or did they get arrested? Or did they get away? We don't know.
Oh, well, actually, one other thought I did have is that the Exterminator, when he realizes that people aren't shifting back into correct phase with real time, he's going and trying to fix it to make sure that people can actually come back. And this will fix it for anyone else who is currently out of phase with stuff. And it's like, why is he putting his resources into this? He's the villain.
Yes.
Why is he like, oh my goodness, no, this won't do. These people are now stuck in limbo. I must help. Yeah, it just makes no sense.
It's strange.
Yes. All right. So, shall we move on to Thor number 153?
Yes. A much better comic. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, Thor, but Dr. Blake can die. And what was the title of last issue that had something about Dr. Blake?
I don't remember, but it turned out to be, it wasn't on the cover of last issue, but on the inside of last issue, there was a whole title about Dr. Blake. But then it turned out he was not in that issue at all. But here he is. He is in this issue.
So in the foreground, we have Loki facing away from us as we see Dr. Blake stamping his walking stick on the ground while in full surgical scrubs, and the specter of Thor behind him as Sif lies on an operating table on the left side of the cover. Another star-studded spectacular by Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby, embellished by Vince Colletta, lettered by Artie Simek. Thor is in the land of the Norns right now. Sif is there, Balder is there, Karnilla is there. Who's not there is Loki. Loki's not there because he has used his Norn powers that he now has in conjunction with his normal Asgardian powers to be able to make off with Thor's hammer, which is bad news. And he's like, oh no, that means I'm about to turn back into Dr. Blake. Well, I'm pretty sure that we've established in other cases that only pertains on Earth, but not in other mystic realms.
I noticed that. It makes no sense. He's in Nornland. He's Nornheim. Is that what it's called? Something like that. And he's all worried about suddenly turning into Dr. Blake. He's never had to worry about that outside of Earth before.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's just plot dependent. But he's asking Karnilla to send him back to Earth so that he can follow Loki, even though he will not have his Thor powers. Sif is like, well, if you're going, you need to send me too. Now, Karnilla then does this and says, this takes care of my debt to Thor for defeating Ulik for me, and it'll kill Thor. So I'm happy in both cases. But didn't we also determine earlier that Sif has the power to transport them from Earth to one of the other realms?
Yes.
Yeah, so no need to really have done that, but what you gonna do? So Loki, meanwhile, is just walking around New York City with Mjolnir. Gets stop and frisked by a cop, basically. He's like, why didn't you tell me you were going to a costume party, when he sees Mjolnir? But then it turns back into the walking stick while they're talking, and Loki's like, aha, that means he has turned back into Dr. Blake. Once again, we've had stories where if he's not holding the hammer, then it doesn't change at the same time he does. Again, it really doesn't matter. We'll just go with it.
Yeah.
So,
but it's a very funny bit on page 3 where we have no idea what Loki is doing on a New York City street, why he is chosen to abscond there with his hammer. But for some reason, he is lurking on a New York City street, presumably waiting to offer candy to children. And he is approached by this cop, and the cop's like, hey, is that Thor's hammer you got there? And he's like, yeah, it is. Why don't you hold it here, guy? And hands it to the cop. As soon as Loki lets go, the hammer, of course, goes thudding down to the ground with the cop's hand on it. And the cop's like, I can't hold it. It's slammed to the ground. It weighs a ton. And Kirby gets good comic mileage out of the hammer being so heavy.
Yes. So Loki and Sif run into each other along with Dr. Blake, and Loki and Sif start doing battle. Blake is just sort of in the background like, I want to be able to do something, but maybe not. So Loki then throws Sif at Blake and then hits them both with a blast. And for whatever reason, this blast affects Sif much more severely than it affects Dr. Blake. Now, page 7, panel 2, this is one that I shared on our socials. You often talk about how Vince Coletta, I think the word you use is sometimes gouges eyes in, like it's with a razor blade or something like that.
Yeah.
And on page 7, panel 2, it looks like there's just a black rectangle for his eyes there.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that it makes him look like he plays keyboards for a new wave band. He looks like maybe some combination of Flock of Seagulls, Adam and the Ants, and Bauhaus. Right? Yeah. Anyway, he is cleverly able to use his suit jacket to wrest his walking stick back from Loki, and he's able to turn back into Thor, and battle is joined.
We have a nice sequence on page 8 where Kirby doesn't usually do it like this, but we see him as Don Blake striking his cane in panel 2, and then we have him in the exact same position as Thor, where the cane is now turned into the hammer on page 8. And it's sort of what Scott McCloud would call a moment-to-moment transition. It's between split second has passed between panels as we see Blake become Thor.
Yes, that is a very well done sequence. Meanwhile, back in Nornland, or whatever it's called, Nornalheim, Carnilla is pining after Balder, who is still there. She is then talking about how he and Thor helped dispense with Ulik, who is now plummeting down this endless chasm. Well, we find out that Ulik is able to grab onto a ledge partway down this chasm and climbs into what looks like a cavern of some sort that is glowing with what looks like gold. I'm wondering if we're going to find out that this is... No, I don't know what this is going to be. Because that wouldn't be Earth, so it wouldn't be the Mole Man. Yeah, I don't know what this is going to be, but they don't pay it off this time. Nope. Somehow, Blake has been able to get Sif into a hospital at which he presumably has admitting privileges.
Yes.
Which, I don't understand how hospitals work in this country, but I know admitting privileges is a thing. So that seems to be what's going on. So he's going to do surgery, but it's clear that this is some sort of Asgardian surgery that has to be done. So no one else can do the operation but him. He has assistants there, but he's not really telling them what's going on. Loki had ended the previous altercation with Thor wrapped up in a street sign, but he has now gotten himself loose and is able to find where Thor is. He is, as Dr. Blake, doing surgery, but he's doing surgery in an operating theater that has an openable window right there behind Dr. Blake, which doesn't seem like the best idea, but what you going to do? He is able to signal to one of the other doctors that he should go and blast Loki with a can of ether. Were they still using ether for this stuff in the 1960s? Was that still a thing? I don't know. Well, I mean, it could be that they just thought of ether because they were still using it in the 30s or something like that.
Yeah, just like Stan hadn't kept up with how much the world population had increased. Maybe he also hadn't kept up with latest anesthesiology developments.
Yes. So anyway, Blake is able to finish it up and be like, the patient's going to live. Get her out of here. Everybody else, leave. I'll take care of this. And they're all like, okay, that must be some psychiatric patient that he's got that he knows how to handle. Let's trust him on this. So they start fighting again, Loki and Thor, and bust out of the window. Odin, meanwhile, is watching this from Asgard and essentially just decides, all right, I need to separate you two. So then he sends some sort of Odin bolt that doesn't hurt either one of them. It just separates them and is like, no, you two must stop fighting because, daddy says so. Yes. And that's sort of an anticlimactic end to the issue, I'm afraid. I wish that there had been more climax to it, but overall, a very good issue despite that.
Yeah, great headshot on page 19. Big splash of Odin's head with a resplendent helmet and scepter and collar as he announces that he's going to break up the battle. It is absolutely gorgeous.
Yes. And in my supposition that Loki is actually Odin's son by the queen of the frost giants, page 18, panel 4, Odin says to himself, 2 sons have I, one most truly noble of all the realm, the other villainy incarnate. And yet they both be blood of Odin's blood, flesh of Odin's flesh. Yea, even omnipotence doth have its sorrow. Again, I
Yes.
think that Odin just likes his ladies large. And
Odin, so we should go back and explain that Odin supposedly adopted Loki, who was a runty frost giant, and was like, oh, he saw that, that the frost giants were going to just leave this runty infant exposed. And he's like, oh, I will adopt him and raise him. But in the story where they originally showed this, you're like, it kind of seems like he might have been gone there to claim a child who is secretly his own love child by the frost giant's wife, who is secretly having an affair with Odin. And yes, this certainly seems to be the case here. He is both be blood of Odin's blood, flesh of Odin's flesh. He certainly seems to be now claiming that he is the biological father of Loki. And indeed, he probably is.
And they often refer to him as Thor's half-brother rather than adopted brother. So it's they've always been a little bit unclear on that, but I'm going to stick to my guns here and say that's what's going on.
Yep.
Okay, so anything else you have to say about this issue?
Yeah, I'll say, first of all, the inking on this issue is just gorgeous. This is inked by Vince Galletta. I have no problem with it. Even look on this first page, even the elbows. Like if I find myself looking at Galletta going like, hey, this is shockingly good. I'm like, look at the elbows, look at the elbows. Even the elbows look great. Everything looks great on this splash page. The way the shadows are being done sort of reminds me of Charles Burns a little bit, who did Black Hole. Don Simpson. It's almost like a underground comic style inking here. Really love the inking in this whole book. It is bizarre when Thor gets in a huge fight with Loki. Thor then eventually just wraps a stop sign around Loki, and he's like, okay, now I can go take care of Sif. It's like, you just wrapped a stop sign around Loki. That's not going to stop him. Ironically, not going to stop him for any amount of time. And indeed, Loki, this just means interrupts in the middle of the operation. It sort of made no sense. We see on page 14 that Loki can fly like Superman. Loki can just sort of fly around like you'll believe a man can fly, which always strikes me as very strange. I don't think Loki should be flying like Superman.
Well, don't worry. He's flying much more strangely in the very next panel.
But that makes more sense for him to sort of be flying upright, flying.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is that it's obeying more of the laws that you seem to want it to obey on that page.
Yeah. I think he should be flying standing upright instead of flying like Superman. As I say at the end, great issue. Don't mind the Don Blake element as long as it's still full of Asgardians. Great art. So, yeah, I don't mind having Don Blake around as long as it's still a mostly Asgardian issue.
Yeah, mostly I agree with you on the inking in this issue. The one panel where I did really have some complaints was that same panel that I was referencing earlier with blood of Odin's blood, flesh of Odin's flesh. It looks like for the very far foreground elbow and shoulder of Odin there. And granted, some things in the extreme foreground usually should have bolder lines, but that just looks like they just took a big old fat marker and drew all those lines on his armor there. But that's my one complaint, and it is very much the opposite of what the usual complaints about Galletta are.
Right. And then I guess there was that panel where his eyes look too gouged out, which does tend to happen with Galletta sometimes. But for the most part, shockingly beautifully inked issue, and certainly beautifully penciled and plotted by Jack Kirby and beautifully scripted by Stan Lee. I like this issue a lot.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and have you tell me about X-Men.
All right. Let's go ahead and wrap up our first part of 3 parts of June 1968 with the X-Men. Now, once again, they're doing this thing where they have the X-Men written really small on the cover and then the topic of the issue written really large. So it's like the X-Men featuring the senses-shattering Cyclops. Cyclops written much bigger than X-Men for some reason. It says, when mutants clash, and it's got Cyclops shooting a beam at Quicksilver, who's running rings around him literally. X-Men, the most unusual fighting team of all time. When mutants clash, roll up for the magical mutant... Okay, roll up for the Magical Mutantia Tour. Oh, I see, like Magical Mystery Tour. Magical Mutantia Tour, Marvelites. Your gallant guides will be Stanley editor, Gary Friedrich scripter, Don Heck layout man, Werner Roth penciler, John Tartaglione inker, Sam Rosen letterer. Once again, we have Friedrich, Marvel's weakest scripter, I would say, doing presumably some of the plotting and the scripting on this issue. We've got 3 of Marvel's weakest artists doing the art, working all 3 of them together. I referred to them as a murderer's row in one of our previous podcasts, and you sort of gave me some brief pushback on that, which I didn't really catch on to. But I guess classically in baseball, our murderer's row are good people.
Yes.
Yes. Um,
Yes, Murder's Row, as in like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and whatever are going to come and murder you because they're really good and you're not nearly as good. In this case, they're just going to murder you with bad art.
Yes. So if I refer to Heck and Roth and Tartaglione as a murderer's row of artists, then that would be like not the good murderers, the bad murderers. So then Cyclops is still all bound up. Really neat sort of sequence of him. Like, of course, you know, what can you do if you're going to put a head shackle on Cyclops? Like, can't he shoot through anything? But what if it was like really, really hard? And then you'd think like, well, it would almost like he would have to shoot it so hard that the beam sort of leaked down his face. And you get to see that on page 2 of him, you know, shooting through the unshootable head manacle. And
but they were very specific in the previous issue where he was first manacled, that they had taken away his other remote control way of opening his visor.
Yeah.
That, you know, he usually does it with grabbing the side of the visor and turning it on, but that he's got some kind of other thing in his glove. And they were very specific that they had gotten rid of that thing, so he couldn't use it. So they've just forgotten about that here.
Oh, well. So then he finally shoots himself free. He gets out. He goes around the basement of the dungeon and checks on Jean, who's still asleep. I guess you were complaining about on social media, page 3, that he talks about going down the hallway, but he's actually going up the stairs.
He's like, I'll go check on that door down there as he's running up the stairs.
So then he runs into Toad, who runs away to go tell Magneto. Meanwhile, Angel has, as you recall, run into Red Raven last issue on the way to the Avengers, but doesn't let that stop for long. He finally gets the Avengers. Cyclops is free in Magneto's place, runs into Quicksilver. Quicksilver really looking ugly under the combination of Heck, Roth, and Tartaglione on page 6. Cyclops gets into a big fight with Quicksilver that lasts for several pages. Toad goes to tell Magneto. Magneto is just awful to Toad. Just awful. What, you sniveling, cowardly dolt. It was your job to see the X-Men remain securely in prison. If you cannot perform the simplest task without bumbling, then you are of no further use to me. Therefore, you may now know the terrifying might of the master of all mutants. No, master, I beg of you, do not turn on the most faithful ally any man has ever. Arg! So anyway, it goes on and on and on of Magneto just being absolutely awful to Toad, which they are going somewhere with this, thankfully. There's a really neat thing on page 9 where Cyclops and Quicksilver are trying to reach some sort of rapprochement here, and neither of them notices one of Hawkeye's fancy sci-fi arrows, but they pointed out to us, like, hey, are you wondering about that? For you eagle-eyed ones who spotted the arrow at top left, hang loose. All will be revealed to you one way or another, says sneaky Stan. Then we have a truly terrible panel on page 10 where finally Quicksilver decides to have it out and punch out Cyclops. And it looks like the first appearance of Ms. Marvel, the second Ms. Marvel, Imran Khan, is that her name?
The third Ms. Marvel.
Third?
There was briefly a woman who wore a red, blue, and yellow costume right around the time of the first Secret Wars comic who called herself Ms. Marvel. Wasn't there? Am I making that up?
Yeah. I guess, yeah. Did she call herself Miss Marvel? Yeah. Who then did wrestling with the Thing later or something like that? Was she called Miss Marvel? Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, one way or the other, it's not really that important. We all know what you mean.
Anyway, there is a Pakistani-American young lady who now calls herself Ms. Marvel in Marvel Comics, and she has the ability to make her fists into giant fists. And we seemingly have her first appearance here on page 10, final panel, where Quicksilver is punching Cyclops. And this is presumably just supposed to be a foreshortened panel, but Quicksilver's fist is way too big. It's as big as the whole rest of his body put together, as he then punches out Cyclops, and the fist suddenly goes flying up towards us as we're looking down in the frame. Anyway, they continue to fight each other for a very long time. And then who should show up but the Avengers? Just as Cyclops has seemingly knocked out Quicksilver and is worried he's killed him, then the Avengers show up and says you'll find the cataclysmic conclusion of this 2-part thriller in Avengers 53 on sale now, which we will be discussing 2 episodes from now on this podcast. There's a backup story, but before we get to the backup story, what did you think of the front story here, Steve?
Not great. I don't know if it's better or worse. It's probably, I like it a little bit better than the Red Raven issue, which really just kind of bothered me in many ways, but still have the weak, too many poor cooks spoiling the broth here.
Yes.
When it comes to the art. It was, I don't know, I found it a little bit interesting where you were talking about Cyclops and Pietro having their discussion about, what they're supposed to be doing, and Quicksilver making the case for mutants having their own country where they could live as mutants and not be threatened by other people who want them dead, which certainly seems like that's not an accidental thing.
Yeah.
Very much feels relevant to world events. So yeah, that I found a little bit interesting, but overall not great.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and certainly speaks to world events in 1968 and world events in 2025.
Yes.
Yeah, I just looking through my notes, why they think the name Cyclops will sell better than the name of the X-Men, I have no idea why they're foregrounding that on the cover. It is odd to have Friedrich on this book, because I know Thomas returns. I think Thomas will be back in just a couple of months, and we'll finish out the run of this book, I'm pretty sure, but it's odd to have Friedrich here for a little bit. This storyline has taken up way too much time. Of course, the Red Raven digression didn't help, but I'm glad it's finally going to get wrapped up, although it's pushed on. I guess maybe they had to stretch it out in X-Men to get to the point where they could wrap it up in Avengers. I don't know. But it'll be good to finally wrap it up. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the backup before we wrap up the episode. The origins of the Uncanny X-Men and the Mob Cried Vengeance. Just so much better. I just like this art so much more. Edited by Stan Lee, written by Gary Friedrich, drawn by George Tuska, inked by Jean Verpoorten. So Jean Verpoorten, I think, works for Marvel in some way. He is a backroom guy, but this is the only book he inks, is this backup feature, which he's been inking now for about 5 months. And he's been doing just a great job. His inks over Tuska here have a very EC vibe to them. This feels more, almost like an Al Feldstein issue. It's
I was thinking it looks, and I think I mentioned in a previous episode that it looks to me a little bit like Will Eisner.
Yeah, it's really nicely done, really nicely inked, and well penciled by Tuska. So Cyclops has broken into Bobby Drake's jail cell to try to break Bobby Drake out of jail, saying, like, they know you're a mutant, they're going to come kill you. And Bobby Drake says, I don't care what you say, I'm going to stand trial. I'm innocent. It was self-defense. I'm going to be fine. And he's like, no, you idiot. Everyone hates mutants. And so finally bursts him out. And he spends the whole issue fighting with Bobby Drake, who is just trying to turn himself back into the cops, while Cyclops is chasing him all over creation, trying to force him to break free. And eventually, it's hard to tell if this is someone in the lynch mob or one of the cops who comes up with a shotgun behind Bobby. But he finally gets the drop on Bobby as Bobby and Cyclops are exhausted from their fight. And then the guy who has the drop on him says, okay, boys, the party's over. You can either come along peacefully or we'll blast you to Kingdom Come. Bobby thinks, no, wait, too weak to raise my hands. But what if they shoot before they realize what really happened? So he's too weak to surrender, and that is where the issue ends, presumably about to get shotgunned. I thought this was a shockingly good little story. Nice art and good enough story that moves things along. I like this origin of the X-Men and of Bobby Drake. I like it. What do you think?
Generally, I liked it. There was one panel where it sort of felt like we were looking at art from the previous art team. The last page of this story, panel 1, I'm trying to figure out what exactly is going on in terms of there's a boat that's going underneath some sort of overpass, and then there's a dock that's extending out in the background, and it's just really difficult to figure out what I'm looking at there. But that's a nitpick, but it is definitely a panel that jumped out at me as odd. But overall, yeah, I really like the art. I think the story, while there's not that much to it, is a good story. And I don't know if this backup story is worth the cost of the book. And I don't think it would keep me buying the book at this point, but it's good to have it.
All right. Well, those are 4 books that are going to be the first 4 we cover for the month of June 1968. I feel like we're really zipping along through the 60s. We are in the late 60s now, very much so, if we're in June 1968. And, of course, you don't want to think about all the stuff America was going through in June 1968. This was a very chaotic time. I think that Martin Luther King was killed in April, and I think Bobby Kennedy was maybe killed in June. We're talking about a very stressful time in American history, but we're only getting little glimpses of that here in the Marvel Comics.
Yes, and, just as with this podcast, it's good to be able to have some kind of place you can retreat from that kind of chaos for a little bit and just let your brain think about other things.
Yep.
So next episode, we're going to be doing Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, and Submariner.
Okay. Well, Steve, this was a lot of fun. By all means, everybody, do your own population growth curve research. We will include links to some of the charts and graphs that we've referenced today on our webpage. Okay, we will see you soon. Bye, Steve.
Take care. Stay safe out there.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.